Alright lads, welcome to the channel. Today we're taking a look at Japan's new Rank 6 Premium. This is the Type 16 FPS, or the first production series of vehicles. This is basically like the Type 16 at battle rating 9.0 in the Japanese tech tree, except it has a slightly downgraded APFS DS round. While for sure the firepower of this tank isn't as good as its tech tree counterpart, it still retains the fantastic thermal imaging, laser warning system, and the incredibly good mobility of the tech tree equivalent. This is a pack premium available on the Gaijin store for the cost of around $60. It's currently in the 6th rank of the Japanese tech tree, sitting at battle rating 8.7 in arcade, realistic and sim. This is quite unusual to me, as most nations are now receiving battle rating 9.7 premiums, but the Japanese are still getting an 8.7. I believe this is quite rough, to be honest, on the Japanese. The 8.7 battle rating is notoriously iffy at the minute because it gets dragged up to 9.7 a lot. And while the Type 16 does have very good mobility, its firepower is a little bit lacking. So while you can do the good old fashioned flank and spank, this vehicle may not be the best for beginner players who are not really that good at knowing when to engage and when not to. This is quite an advanced vehicle, I'd say. It's not someone that you can pick up and play like a T72AV terms. So if you're a newer player, you may want to give this tank a miss. But is it a good premium, and is it worth buying? Well, that is the question of the hour. If you'd like to know the answer to that question, then stick around for the rest of the video. Alright lads, welcome back. This vehicle is powered by an engine producing 570 horsepower. Combined with the vehicle's low weight of 26 tons though, it gives the tank a very good power to weight ratio of 21.9 horsepower per ton. This would be very good for a tracked vehicle, but because the tank is a wheeled vehicle, it does suffer a little bit when it comes to the traction of the vehicle. This means acceleration is a little bit iffy, to be honest. On soft terrain it isn't very good, but on hard terrain it's excellent. Regardless though, the acceleration of the Type 16 is generally very good, but again, as I said, if you're on a wet map or muddy map, it does leave a little bit to be desired, and you may want to spawn a tracked vehicle instead. The flip side to this though is that on a urban map or a paved map, the Type 16 is probably the fastest tank in the game. In fact, it has a top speed of 100 km per hour and a reverse speed of 37 km per hour. And with that very high power to weight ratio, you kind of reach these top speeds very quickly, allowing you to critically exploit your speed to get into those very good early game positions, which in many ways is the meta to Warframe at the minute. It's just getting to a good position at the start of a game and completely dominating a choke point. This kind of makes the Type 16 up tier proof in ways, because you can always use your mobility to have an influence on the map, where that option really isn't available to some of these slower tanks in game. So we know that the Type 16's mobility is very good, but what about its survivability? Well, it's an infantry fighting vehicle or a support vehicle. It isn't designed to take hits from main caliber anti-tank guns. But if we take a look at its armor performance against the 57mm gun of the 2S38, that annoying Russian premium, we can see that at a range of 100 meters, our lower frontal plate gives us 140mm of protection. This is pretty good, to be honest, and it does make this tank pretty much immune from guns like 30mm autocannons. The BMP2s will struggle to penetrate you frontally, but it does make you an easy penetration from pretty much anything larger than a 76mm gun. The upper frontal plate is very well angled, which will allow you to bounce some incoming APFS rounds if you get lucky, but this isn't something you can rely on, and the lower frontal plate is obviously a lot bigger target. We then move up to the turret, where it provides us 105mm protection. Again, not amazing, but certainly good enough to stop BMP2s. And then finally, the gun mantler in the middle of the turret provides us 174mm of protection. Quite strange really, you'd expect the gun mantler to be the thinner part, but hey ho. All in all though, the Type 16 is proof pretty much from the front against infantry fighting vehicles. 20 and 30mm autocannons shouldn't really be able to penetrate you. Those annoying little bastards are still going to be able to knock out your gun, to cripple your wheels, stuff like that. And obviously any 105, 125, 120mm guns are going to be able to punch straight through to your armour. But to take one last look at the armor protection of this tank, again using the 2S38's main gun, you can see here that using the APF SDS round, you can basically punch through pretty much the entire front of the vehicle, the lower frontal plate in the turret especially. Basically anything larger than 30mm is going to cleave straight through this thing. But SAKO, I hear you saying, armor protection has never been a strong point of light tanks. It's mainly the firepower and the speed of a light tank which makes it good. And you're absolutely right. And the tank does have very good mobility, we've covered that. So what about its firepower? Well, it's armed with a 105mm JWS cannon with 40 rounds of ammunition in total. We have a first stage ready rack of 15 rounds, and mediocre gun handling with 6 degrees of gun depression and 15 degrees of gun elevation. And as you'd expect, it does have a 2-plane gun stabilizer. But if we take a look at the reload speed, it does have the bog standard NATO 105's reload speed. With a stock crew, it's going to reload every 8.7 seconds. And with an ace crew, that drops down to 6.7 seconds. So there's no real advantage here in terms of the fire rate. The fire rate is actually pretty low, but I guess it is average. But there are lots of vehicles at 8.7 and especially at 9.7, which will reload much faster than you can. We then come on to the ammunition, which is arguably the weak point of this vehicle. We have 4 different types of ammunition available to us. We have the Type 91 Heat Fest round, a HESH shell, a smoke shell, and then finally the M735 round. You may recognise the M735 round as being the terrible round found on the XM-1. This APF-SDS round is found on several early American vehicles, and it has pretty bad post-pen damage. It doesn't create much spalling. I haven't really had that bad of an experience with it, but when I used to play the XM-1, it was quite painful to use that tank because of this round. It's kind of unreliable, especially against some of the angled upper frontal plates of the T72 series. It kind of just gets eaten up by them. So you are going to have to place your shots well if you're going up against some of the Soviet heavy tanks. In a down tier or at your own battle rating of 8.7, you aren't going to have that much trouble using this round. But again, it's that future proofing or up tier proofing which I'm a little bit worried about. It's basically just an XM1 on wheels, to be honest. It's got very good mobility, but the firepower is a little bit mediocre. So just take that with a pinch of salt, really. The main ammunition for this tank isn't really that good. But what is excellent is the gun handling and the fire control systems, I guess. This tank does have 2nd generation thermal imaging for the gunner's sight. This makes it fantastic to use, especially on some of the flankier maps, like the desert maps where you can really get around. You can spot people with your thermal and then pick them off from long range. All in all though, this is definitely a sniping vehicle or a flank and spank vehicle. It suits, ironically you'd think it'd be better on like paved maps, but to be honest I think it's better on the more wider open rural maps like Maginot Line. We can really put that speed advantage to work, get behind or on the side of enemies, and then use your fantastic thermal imaging to spot and then engage targets. While it's hard to recommend any $60 premium to anyone, I will say that the Type 16 FPS is a fun tank, although it does take skill to use effectively in my opinion. It doesn't hold your hand the same way something like the T72 AV Terms does, and you require pretty good map knowledge to fully exploit this vehicle. Because of this, I'd only recommend it to experienced War Thunder players, and if you don't really want to grind out the Japanese tech tree, I definitely wouldn't recommend buying this. You aren't missing out on anything really, it's not that unique. The Japanese top tier lineup also isn't that great. All we have at 8.7 alongside this tank is the Type 74s, they're pretty trash. And while the Type 10s are very good in the game, the rest of the Japanese top tier lineup is pretty mediocre, to be honest. So again, not really worth grinding the Japanese tech tree. So anyway lads, I had fun with this vehicle. It's let down by its APF SDS round, but its mobility is fantastic. Anyway lads, that's all I've got to say on the matter. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. Big thank you to all my YouTube members, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.